video, I talked to Dr. Graham Barnfield about the growing debate over the future of jury trials in England and Wales. With Crown Court backlogs now at record levels, the government is considering reforms that could see more criminal cases decided by judges rather than juries. Supporters say this could make the justice system faster and perhaps more efficient, while the critics warn it risks weakening an important democratic safeguard for defendants. My accompanying article looks at how other countries approach criminal trials and asks what lesson the UK might learn. In this interview, Dr. Barnfield shares his perspective on why juries matter and what could be lost if their role is reduced. So, Dr. Barnfield, my first question is, why do you think jury trials matter in the UK, in democracy like the UK, and what is at stake if they limit the jury trials here?
Well, the main reason to defend jury trials at the moment is that they offer protection to the accused. And the difficulty is the argument for getting rid of them is being presented as a sort of a technical question where they say, OK, if there's a likely criminal sentence of 3 years or fewer, then we can go directly to a judge. The problem with that really is that the jury is made up of people like ourselves, and their wisdom in working out what happens is preferable to that of a judge, partly because of the way that they can find on behalf of a defendant in a way that judges may well not do. And certainly in the history of jury trials, although it goes back to the Magna Carta. And in those days, a jury of our peers was literally, barons, right? So ordinary people wouldn't get a jury trial. But the barons' argument at the time was one that said that they could be judged by the king, but they felt they were better than the king's representatives who were sent to judge them. Therefore, they wanted to have a jury of their peers or other barons. Now, that's not particularly democratic in and of itself, but it was a foot in the door for a more democratic system for ascertaining if the law had been broken, than simply having a judge sitting in court and deciding. And also, over time, it's become clear that it's a more democratic alternative than some of the other things that were either going on at the time, trial by combat or trial by ordeal in the medieval times. And because of the involvement of citizens, people have expressed a preference for it over that of other, Western European legal systems, which may be inquisitorial in their approach rather than the adversarial approach of the jury being open to being convinced. So one good reason to keep jury trials, why it's democratic, is it gives people greater protection than a trial by a judge would. Secondly, it's good for citizens as well. So the idea that a citizen can be trusted to sit on a jury and deliberate over very important matters about innocence and guilt and so on, actually elevates us as citizens as well, and that's a reason to defend it. Now, in practice, things can be a bit more uneven if anyone's ever done jury service, but that's not an argument for getting rid of jury service. That's an argument for in some way strengthening the system and making it more, or continuing to have it be more credible as a sign of what type of citizens we are. So it's good for the accused to have a jury. And incidentally, that's why people like the Justice Secretary talk about accused people, playing the system guilty criminals, stringing out cases, all that. But nevertheless, that's a reflection of the way it does protect people when they're on trial before a court. But at the same time, it makes citizens look and feel and be confirmed as serious players in our system, with a stake in what happens. You know, I mean, it's almost like if you were to say you can't trust someone to be on a jury in general because they're not a specialist, why would you trust them to vote?
Oh,
You know,
right,
that
right.
sort of
I
thing. So
understand.
I think the some of the arguments against juries, whether they mean to or not, end up diluting the case for citizens having a say in things. And there's other things as well, like juries kind of keep the justice open and accountable in ways that perhaps a single judge trial might not do as well.
So you would say it keeps the democracy healthy?
Relatively, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
you see, I think one of the tricky things at the moment is people who support jury trials are on the back foot because the proposal is to abolish them in lots of criminal cases. And so the starting point is to defend them.
Yeah.
Now, in practice, there have been miscarriages of justice under the jury system. There might be anecdotally, people often say, "Oh, juror X wasn't really taking it seriously and was more interested in the sandwiches than the conduct of the trial." And so, but again, that's not an argument for getting rid of the jury system. But that's possibly an argument for improving on it. But right now, the two artificial things have been kind of lashed together. So the backlog in the criminal justice system in Britain is a real thing, but it's not being caused by jury trials. And getting rid of jury trials probably won't make much of a dent in it anyway. And the price is too high. If we went to criminal justice trials on a Saturday as well, maybe till Easter, you could reduce the backlog, but you don't have to sacrifice democratic rights. And likewise, if the IT worked properly in courts, if the prisons security providers could deliver people into court on time, or indeed at all, those kind of technical issues would solve the backlog, or start to at least eat into the backlog in a much less damaging way than getting rid of trial by jury. If most criminal cases with a possible sentence of under 3 years, I mean, that technical sort of mentality as well is part of the problem, because it's a bit like saying they know in advance the person is guilty because they know in advance their sentence will be less than 3 years if found guilty.
Yeah.
So therefore the idea that they're innocent until proven guilty has been gets sacrificed in that process. And of course, once you've given up on things that carry a 3-year sentence, why not go for something carrying a 5-year sentence? Or why not 7 years? And that's sort of the problem. It's also got the potential to pick up speed and momentum, because the idea is, we look at the backlog shrinking, whereas the backlog is not created by jury trials. It's various faults within the system dragging things out.
And a lot of supporters, they also say that it can help with speeding up the trial process. What would you say to them?
What you mean, supporters of abolishing jury trials say that? Yeah. Well, it's probably true that what they're saying, if you've got a single judge ruling on the facts of a case to establish the person's guilt or innocence, it probably is faster. But that's not a reason to do it. I mean, I'd be lying if I said, oh no, juries are 20 times faster. The point is, juries are much more considered and better at protecting innocent people and thinking through the evidence and taking it seriously.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
also think they can just, put themselves in that person's shoe and see what it feels like, maybe, yeah.
yes. I mean, because the idea of a jury of our peers is precisely that, the notion that the citizens have got something in common
Mm-hmm.
wherever they are sitting in the courtroom. Um, Whereas judges, and sometimes people make this as the case for judges, is deliberately or often quite distant from society. And certainly in British criminal justice, when it's overblown on the part of an elderly judge,
Yeah.
then people would say, "Oh, okay, right, they're a bit too out of touch," And there's lots of, I mean, I'm of an age where judges getting confused about footballers' nicknames and
Yeah.
digital watches and stuff like this was routinely reported on, because these were often people in their late 70s, early 80s, like 40 years ago, and the idea that they were out of touch, if there was too much of it, then it was criticised, but often it was seen as a reason for having judges, because they were part of they were outside of the everyday life, and that was a case that was used to say this is what's good about judges. Um, that isn't used very often these days, but it nevertheless suggests that jury members are closer to real life and everyday experience than judges. I mean, I think it's quite possible today, because we're seeing it. You've also got the rise of kind of activist judges
Yeah.
who, in their own way, are wildly out of touch with the public as well. So
Oh, yeah,
the
completely.
traditionalist judge, the idea is that they're sort of trapped in the 18th century, and it's very fashionable to sort of kick such judges for that now. But in reality, those kind of people would have been retired for quite a while now, most of the time, and instead a lot of the people coming in might also then have a ideological point of view which is equally disconnected from the public, and then might feed into how things respond. I mean, you can see this a lot, probably around where people are getting convictions for social media
Yeah.
offences, that by and large the wider public would have much more tolerance for what is speech than activist judges. And so you can see that there's often a willingness of juries to sort of just ignore and strike out those kind of charges against the accused to do with, say, social media, whereas the modern activist judge will pursue the person for alleged kind of hate speech and things like that. So yeah, so I think you're quite right. The jury
Yeah.
is far closer to everyday life than either the most old-fashioned judges or the most activist judges. Started talking and thinking about this set of proposals.
Yeah, which reminds me, if they manage to limit jury trials, how do you think general public will react to it, or would it impact their trust in the system?
I think it depends on how it plays out, because um, obviously there's people's sympathy for convicted criminals is not enormous
Yeah.
most of the time, and so if it seems to be locking up bad people, I think a portion of the public will put up with it. But once you start locking up the wrong people, or and even if you can, one of the tricky things here as well is that sometimes the type of people who are acquitted in a jury trial may
Yeah.
also have a significant criminal history. It's just they couldn't be shown to have done the particular thing. And some people have an instrumental attitude, well, that gets them off the street because they seem like the type. But the exact same thinking causes miscarriages of justice. So, I mean, I think, you can tell just looking at motorists in the UK. I mean, it's a very archaic term. It suggests people drive their cars as a hobby. But if
Yeah.
you look at motorists, when they're close to the criminal justice system, then they really don't like it. They feel in the pressure and they want to assert their rights and their innocence and so. So I think there's a portion of the public who it might be sailing a bit close to the wind with the criminal justice system, who think, right, I can see the case for juries now and not judges. And there are people who will, you know, be not upset that bad people get locked up, but that's not really an argument for getting rid of juries in the justice system. Because you want that if someone's going to lose 3 years out of their life, go to prison, you want that decision to be safe and the punishment to fit the crime.
That's true.
And judges at the moment have the power over doing that with sentencing. So a first-time offender, if they get past magistrates' court, will still tend to be more leniently treated than a career criminal. But that's to do with sentencing and what they call mitigation. It's not something the jury decides on. The jury decides if a person's basically innocent or guilty, or well, technically guilty or not guilty within the criminal justice system. And, you know, to take that away, lots of people now who are, you know, innocent until proven guilty would suddenly find themselves in a much tighter corner if they were up before a judge instead of a jury. So, you know, I think the other thing that might shift around a bit is how, in general, how strong people's sense of what their rights are is. Will you know, they'll start to link the abolition of jury trials to their sort of changing situation generally, you know, and certainly away from, I mean, in opposition, the opposition parties at least sometimes go through the motions of saying how the government is restricting our rights on all these different points. You know, as I say, it's complicated because you know, there's things like the Human Rights Act is criticised by people who are also supportive of democratic and civil rights in general. They just think the Human Rights Act is disappointing, and then there's other people for whom the Human Rights Act is a barrier to a more oppressive set of state controls. So there's a lot of murkiness in the different opposition party positions and things, but you know, generally voters are supportive of their own freedom, a bit suspicious sometimes of other people's, but they would like the legal system to reflect that, you know, and that's important, that they're sort of defending their corner, if you like. So I think there's a whole range of public opinions on it, and often if you sort of sit down and explain it to people, then they'll come round to sympathising with jury trials, which is important, because as I say, it gives people protection, and it also treats you as a serious citizen, you know, that you'd have to do or get invited to do jury service.
Oh, definitely. Is there any example that comes to your mind which is like which proves that, you know, we need jury trials? It's so glorious that it reminds people that why jury trials are so important in the UK.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to you. So, I mean, some people kind of say, "Oh, it goes back to Magna Carta and blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
But the case of the Quakers, you know, the two Williams, is important because they're in their refusal to, the jury's refusal to convict Quakers for a public order offence, then meant the judge wanted to prosecute the Quakers for wanted to prosecute the jury for not coming to the right verdict by acquitting the Quakers, and that was followed up with a fine, and then there was an attempt to imprison them for not paying the fine. So when people win cases like that, clearly it shows that the wisdom of the crowd, if you like, is much better than the wisdom of the judge, or the attempts of a state official to impose their will on people who should not have been in that sort of situation. And there are, the American history, because before, when it was the colonies rather than the United States, already English common law was becoming embedded.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that judges would push for was prosecution of what was called seditious libel. And seditious libel laws basically were ones that cracked down on free speech, and they interpreted all kinds of criticism of the government of the day and some actions as well as being about overthrowing the government, and attempted to prosecute for those things. So, and what juries tended to do in the forerunner of the United States was throw out seditious libel cases, not least because the citizens that were on trial were people who were seen as part of England or Britain, but were becoming American citizens. And so, in the course of becoming American citizens, as soon as they gave that some sort of political muscle, that becomes seditious libel. London-friendly, judges are trying to get them sent down for that, and America-friendly juries were typically acquitting them. So there's plenty of straight sort of forward history of free speech kind of acquittals going on in times when free speech was the criminal offence as far as the authorities were concerned. So you do find in America where this system is adopted, and in fact the right to a trial by jury ends up in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, and therefore the amendments to the Constitution. The expectation, this is a very good expression of people's freedom and citizenship and so on.
And if the jury trials, if they get curtailed, are there any safeguards to protect fairness and to keep the legitimacy of judiciary system intact?
Well, there are fewer safeguards. I mean, people who are wrongly convicted will have to find a different, legal route to try and overturn their convictions, whereas under the jury system, possibly the same evidence and presentation of facts to people means that it's the acquittal that does the protecting. So the idea that someone's committed a particular offence might not convince a jury that that's the case, and so the jury would overrule the punishment. So if you take out that protection, someone's convicted by a judge, which it was the case in Northern Ireland in the 70s under the diplock courts system. It was held in secret, basically, with a judge presiding, and there are a lot of people who had been involved in the Republican struggle or movement without necessarily committing specific offences, but because they seem like the type, the line between them as protesters and potential terrorists was broken by a judge in a way that a jury of their peers might not have done. So in a way, people. Someone who is sent down by a judge in the absence of a jury trial may well start trying to find successful ways to appeal it, but the fact that they're having to do that, it tells them that they've already missed out on one whole layer of democratic protection that you get from your fellow citizens.